Howdy folks, in this particular lecture I'm going to show you how to work with normalizing the data set that you need to put into a SQL server. So for that you can actually write a SQL code to bring the data into your SQL server. It could be your MySQL database or MariaDB. It could be your Oracle database, it could be your PostgreSQL database, it could be your Microsoft SQL server, it could be IBM DB2 SQL server, and so on. But the key point of this lecture is basically if you are a developer, so like let's say you are a Java developer, a full stack Java developer, you are not a SQL developer. You need to understand the differences here. So this lecture is focused on people who are let's say software developer or Java developer, web application developers. Okay, so they don't need to go all the details and in depth what SQL developers do. Okay, so the SQL developers are basically coming to data analytics, business intelligence, and that perspective in that level. But this lecture is not focused on that. This lecture is focused on people who need the data to bring into your SQL server, and most likely if you're working at Java, it would be MySQL or PostgreSQL. Okay, so let's jump right in and take a look into the data set that is given by one of my friends. And he is actually a data analyst or business intelligence analyst, work for Walmart. Okay, so the data is a real data set, and that data has roughly around 10,000 rows of data. So the question is, when you're dealing with large sets of data set, it is not large like millions of rows of data, but still it is a large set of data. Good news is the Excel Power, you call it Excel Power now, with Office, you can get it like Office 2020 onwards. Okay, and Power Query or Power Pivot or Pivot Table, Power Pivot, Power Query, these are extensively super powerful tools. Okay, so we didn't have that in the past, but now we have it, and we can do everything in like a GUI interface. Okay, so that's why this lecture is different than other lectures, because a lot of people is going to show you how to write a SQL code to bring the data, and you can do that way if you want to spend a lot of time doing that. But you're not a SQL developer, you're a Java developer. So to make the life easier, just utilize Power Tool, Excel Power Tool, okay, in Windows, and bring the data into your Linux servers where you're running in Java. So this lecture is all about that. So don't do anything in Windows when it comes to Java to start off with, but you can utilize Windows for different purposes. So I got different machines for different purposes. So this machine is Windows 10 machine, and it has it has Office 2024 in it. So I've installed Office 2024. That lecture is also posted into my YouTube channel, and you don't have to pay anything for that. So in this lecture, what we plan to do is basically we're going to work with this data set and normalize the data set, so that when the data is normalized and the data is kind of created a relational model, then we can actually start bringing the data into MySQL. I'm not going to cover that part. We're going to cover normalizing the data set. We're going to cover a lot of extensive theory in here, what is normalizing and how we do it. So let's jump right in and take a look into the data set to start off with. So we go into a particular directory where the data is there, and the data is actually in a comma separated value. This is kind of data you get into computers like this kind of comma separated value CSV format data set, and we don't want to open this data set right now. We're just going to open it in a text editor just to give you some like kind of feelings how this data looks like. And you look at this, when you look into these numbers and everything, it's all kind of strings and a bunch of numbers, and people don't understand. The machine understand very well, okay, but you particularly struggle to understand all these. So this data set is all mushmash because it got a lot of things in there. So we actually need to look at it into Excel, right? Okay. So now you just it's already showing the icon in the left because Excel can pick it up. Okay, the CSV data set. So you just click it, and Excel Office 2024 will load the data right there, and this is your data set. So let's just talk a little bit about normalizing the data set. So in here you can see every cell is a unique transaction, okay, and this number is unique. It never happened in the past and never gonna happen in the future. So this is static one current instance. But if you look into city, state, and product, these are not unique because one city can have a lot of population, a lot of people who can go into that particular shop and buy those things over and over. So this can happen in the future, this has happened in the past, and this is happening right now. Okay, so you need to understand the differences between the data set in table, the quantity, discount, profit, and all these stuff that you can see in here. Okay, so these stuffs are actually what we call a fact table data set, and these are unique data set. But the rest of the stuffs are not like unique, and that's why you have a redundancy. You can see these repetitions of Seattle, because the guy from Seattle is going over and over into the same shop and buying these things. So same as things. So the normalizing is a process of making sure that we can disintegrate the ones that are not necessarily going to have any instances in the future, or it has happened in the past. Okay, so like example, quantity, discount, profit, this is never going to happen. So this is your real data set that you can call it as a fact table data set, and the rest of this just need to be disintegrate and put it into a different table, and that's what we're going to do. And that makes it what basically means that you will have sales, quantity, discount, and profit as your primary key. That is the unique values for each of them. So the sales ID, you can call them sales ID, and each sales ID is unique. By the same token, city, state, and products, they will have their own particular table where there is no repetitions. Okay, so that means city will have only one city, not Seattle repeating over and over. And then what we do need to do in the fact table, we will join these two tables together to ensure the data redundancy has been taken care of through a primary key and foreign key relationship. Okay, so city has a city ID, which is basically primary key, and each city is unique, and that going to be your primary key for that particular table, which we're gonna join with this fact table as a foreign key when this city is going to be matched up. Okay, so this is what we call joining. You can do it inner join if you know a little bit of a SQL, and then you can have a outer join, and that both of them will work just fine. Okay, so I would say that you can do outer join, and because that will take into null values as well. So you don't really need to be a rocket scientist to understand that. It's just a very basic conception to make sure that all these data set in here that has redundancy need to be taken care of. They will have to have a different table as a unique table. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So this is a very basic crude theory. You can go into Google and type normalizing the data set, but don't go into SQL normalizing them, because they will come up with different things like at least 7 different normal form, they call it. We don't want that, and you just have to stick with what I just said. You just have to follow 2 normal form. The first normal form is we don't want any data set where there's redundancy. Okay, and the second is basically the data that are unique in terms of they're not going to happen in the future or never happened in the past will come as a fact table, and the rest of the stuff, logically speaking, you have to disintegrate. And we know exactly product, sales, product, furniture, office, they can go over and over, because you can sell furniture in the future and you have sold it in the past. Same with the state. The same state can sell stuffs. People from the states can sell stuffs. They can buy stuffs and they can sell stuffs in the future, and they've done it in the past as well. Okay, so this is the concept you need to kind of grasp, and then you're all like basically home free. So let's jump right in. So this data set is what we do need to do. We need to get into this data set, into Power Query stuff. Okay, so this is a new revolutionized Excel stuff, and with Power Pivot you can actually slice and dice data of millions and millions of rows, and your computers will be absolutely fine. Okay, and this was not there. That's why it's not a granddad's Excel anymore. Okay, so this is revolutionized Excel because it has superpower, and it is so powerful that it is actually as similar as doing things in SQL. Okay, that's why as a Java software developer, you're not a SQL developer. So if you're a SQL developer, you're probably dealing with billions of rows of data, and Excel will crash. That's fine. That's understandable. But this lecture is not for SQL developers or business intelligence developer or data analyst. This lecture is particularly for people who are working as web applications developers. So you could be Java full stack developer like myself, and I need to normalize the data set and bring the data into my SQL database. And how I'm going to do that in Excel. So in here, this data is all mushmart, so let's just jump right in and start normalizing the data set. So the first thing we're going to do from here is we're going to go into the data and you click the data tab, and there you can see one thing is from table range. Can you see that? Because we're going to choose this table, and this is going to be a real connection table. Okay, so choose that table from table range, and it will basically, what it's going to do is basically you're going to choose that, and it's going to give you that row, and click OK, and that's fine. So it has been chosen now. So this is going to be, so what we do need is Power Query to load up, and this is a Power Query engine. Okay, so that is kind of different than what you have seen before. So now it came to the Power Query. You can see this headers has been kind of nicely packed up, and ABC means is a string, 1.2 is the decimal point, so you have the sales quantity, etc., etc., and this data looks pretty cool. Okay, so from here, as you can see on the right hand side, these steps, that what it does, basically keep a record of that. Excel artificial intelligence can actually keep a record of all that, and that's all cool. And we want all this data. Just take a look into the data, because there's a lot of redundancy. We don't want to remove those data set, but what we do need is basically ensuring this data is kind of segregated and have a different table altogether, but we're going to do that a little later. So first, we have established that these are unique cells, and we need a unique ID for sales quantity, discount, and profit. Okay, so to do that, we go into add column, and then we go to index column, and then from 1, okay, and then the index has been created. Okay, so each has a unique number. Okay, so this is the first thing you need to do. Okay, so now we're going to change that index to what we call a sales ID, sales underscore ID. Okay, so what it means is basically each cell is unique, and we want that in here. Why is not moving? Oh well, let's move it there. Okay, so you got sales ID. So now what we mean that each cell is unique, and each has a unique number. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, it goes from 1. Okay, so cells number 1 cells, why it is unique? Because it's not going to happen in the future, and it never happened in the past. It was an instant. But we cannot do that with, so this is one thing. Okay, this is one thing. So you got a fact table in here, sales ID, sales quantity, discount, okay, and profit, and that's cool. And the rest of the stuff like city, state, and product category, they can happen in the future, they happen in the past, so they'll have to disintegrate from this table. Okay, so what's going to happen is basically we want this table, we want this data to be kind of joined in, which each of these has in their own particular table. Okay, so you'll see it how I do it in here. It's very tricky, but it's simple. It's not difficult. Just understand the logic here, because we want city, but we want the city as a different table where there is no redundancy. At the moment, we have a lot of redundancy that violate the second normal form. Okay, so you have normal form, which is basically developed by a guy who developed SQL back in 1970s when he was working with IBM, and his name is Cod, and Fishcard, Dr. Fishcard or something. Okay, it's different, isn't it? It's a weird name. Cod is a fish, and his name is Cod as well. And he developed this relational database system, so what we call it, relational database management system, or RDBMS. Okay, so we're gonna create that relation. So it's basically one-to-many relationship. That is the one that you need to focus on. You don't need many-to-many relationship. You don't need 2-to-1 relationship or whatever. You need one-to-many relationship. What do we mean by that? Okay, so you see it a little later when the lecture gets a little intense. But for now, the CL can have hundreds of different cells, but each cell represents one CLL. Okay, so that's one-to-many relationship. So this is something that we need to establish, and we can establish once we get the data right and correct in Power Query. We're going to go into Power Pivot, and we create what we call relational entity relation model, or relational data model. Okay, and these guys in data analytics, business intelligence, they don't know much SQL, they don't know much about coding, so they just call it data model. Okay, so they are all same things. Okay, and we call it a study schema data model, or Kimball's data dimension model. So they're all same words. Okay, so it's just like a fancy different word. Okay, so the guy Kimball, he started doing this kind of data analytics things, and he figured that we're gonna call it Kimball's data dimension model, basically stealing stuff that Fish has done back in 1970s when he was working in IBM. But pretty much similar thing. Okay, so entity relation model. So let's jump right in and start doing these things in Power Query to start off with. So at the moment, the data looks all cool. So what we need to do is basically we're gonna go into the file, home tab, and then we're gonna do close and load data. Okay, so the data is gonna be loaded now. Okay, so once the data is loaded right here, You see there's 9,994 rows. As I said, it's nearly 10,000 rows of data. It's a large data set. And now what the first thing we do need to do from this table is basically, this table is what we call, now at this point of time, at we need to segregate this table. Okay, so just bear with us and see what we can do. So the technique is basically the city column. Okay, so this whole column, so choose the whole column and do Control C. Okay, so this column is going in the different direction now. Okay, so it's going into a different sheet altogether. So click plus and put it right here. Okay, so that's the first thing you do. So you go back to the table one. You can change that name now. So we're gonna change that name to lookup table. Okay, and we call it we're gonna call it city connection. Okay, so we're gonna call it city connection. Okay, so just city connect. Okay, so just leave it there. So this is for your own references. And that table one, press the escape button to get out from here. That's fine. This is going to be a table that you're going to work with. So this is going to be a fact table. So change that name to fact table. Okay, so we're going to call it just fact table. Okay, so if data is going to stay there, because we're going to replace that when we do the margin the data set, basically inner join or outer join. You'll see it a little later. So we do the same thing with the state. Okay, so we're going to choose that and then do Control C, and then we're going to create a different table and put it here. So we're basically disintegrating the table. You see how it be disintegrated shortly. And we're going to call it state connection. Just make sure you name it right. Okay, so state connection. Why are we calling it connection? Because we're going to bring this table into our Power Query, and Power Query need this table to do the connection. Okay, so one thing in Power Query is really important to understand. You have your base connection table, and then you can do other things in Power Query and bring that table next to connection table. If you change anything in the connection, for example, move the connection main original connection, then Power Query will get screwed up. So you just have to understand what I'm doing here. Okay, so just call it Power Connect, State Connect, and press enter. And the rest, what we call is product category. So we're going to do the same thing with product category. Choose all of that, Control C. Create a new table and put it here, Control V, and name that as product category. Sorry, product category connection. Okay, so now these what we call it connection or main table that Power Query need to be connected with. So let's jump right back into our main fact table. Stay there in the fact table. Just go first into your, now you got a lot of tables and get really confusing. So we're going to start with the city table. So you got city connect right here. Okay, and from here what do? You go to data and you go from table range, and then Power Query will invoke it and put it right into that Power Query window. Okay, so now you have this one. Okay, so this is your table. Table one is the one that we have the main table, so we're going to change the name, fact table. So it's important to bring all these tables that we have worked with to Power Query window. It's really important. So just understand what I'm doing here. So in Excel you have created all those tables. These are connection table, but you are actually bringing into Power Query engine, Power Query table. So because we're going to do all these kind of stuffs in here, so we're going to call it fact table, and this one's going to be our table 3. This is going to be our city lookup table. Okay, now we're going to change that because we don't want any city lookup, so we're going to call it city lookup. Okay, so now what we're going to do from here is basically we gonna this column heading needs to be updated. So we're going to choose this city and then use first row as headers. So just to use first row as headers. Okay, so when you choose use first row as headers, then it automatically bring the city up and get rid of that column one thing. Do you understand? So now other thing that you need to do, bear in mind that you don't do any formatting, because this text format need to be matched up with your main fact table. The fact table has that city right here. Okay, so what we're doing here, we're going to get rid of all the redundancy. So we're going to just right click right here. Okay, so choose the whole things first. Okay, so you have chosen all that, and then just right click, and then you can see something called remove duplicates. Okay, so do that first. Okay, so now all the duplicates of Seattle is only once, and what we do need now is basically we go to add column and index column, and then do from one. Okay, so now it has its own unique ID, so we're gonna call it city ID, right? So change the name city ID. So now tell me, very simple, don't get panicked. So you have city ID with each unique value, right? Because the cities are no longer repeated, so each has its own unique ID for each city. Okay, fact table has city and they are redundant because they are repeated, but that's cool. But what we do need to do, we need to merge these two tables, basically what we call joining these two tables. So if we join these two tables, then what happened, Excel Power Query will match up that Seattle has come 3 times, so that 3 is basically in your city lookup is number 1, right? Number 1 is Seattle, so that 3 Seattle will come as 111. You understand? And that's what we need. That's what we call normalizing the data. We can have, and what it is happening there, it is coming as a foreign key in this fact table, because that city table is now joined with this fact table, and key is matched. 1 is Seattle. Okay, if you understand this conception, then you're halfway there. Okay, so we're gonna merge little later. So we're gonna do these operations in Power Query, and we're gonna go into the next one. Okay, so we're gonna go back to our home, and then we do close and load. Okay, so that will now bring a city lookup right here. Okay, and that's all cool, and you can see city lookup right here. And now we're gonna go back to our state connection, and then we're gonna go to data, and then this time from table range, again choose the table range, make sure you choose the table range, and then my table has headers, check that one. If you check that one, then we had that problem with column 1 thing. That will not happen because state will be classed as your header. Click OK, and now Power Query will figure that out, that state is your header, so you don't have to do this extra step that I have done on the city. So you can see the state is been classed as a header. It has been promoted as a header, as you can see from here. So from here we're going to change that name to, what do we call it, state ID. Okay, so once we change that name to state ID, so we see that Washington has been repeated several times. So we're going to do the same process. We don't want any of the redundancy, so we're going to change the whole, we're going to choose the whole column, and then right click and remove duplicates, and it's make it really easy. But if you want to do this in SQL, if you're becoming a SQL developer, then you have to write a bunch of code to do that, and that's cool as well. But you're not a SQL developer, you're a Java developer, so utilize Power Query to do this kind of stuff. Okay, so from here now we're going to do the same thing. We go to add column, and we go to index column and start index from 1 again. So that index is basically your primary key of this table. Okay, so we're going to bring that right here in front of states, and then we're going to change that name to state ID, state underscore ID. Okay, so that now we have the state done. Okay, so we go back and close and load the table. Okay, that's cool. And now we are only left with the furniture stuff. So we just go back to the main connection table. Just remember, you're making connections with your whole data range. So you got a bunch of tables, and they're like kind of changed into Power Query and brought back into your main Excel workbook. Okay, so you got product category connection. So you have a state ID, and then you have a state connection, right? Did you remember that? So you have a state ID, a state connection, city. You can look into the city lookup. One thing I need to do, I need to go back to state ID actually. So when you go back to state ID, when you want to go to the Power Query screen again, so let's just click that in here. We're gonna call it a state lookup. We need to change the name into Power Query. That's why you got a little confused here. So you see the name in here. We're gonna change that to state lookup. Okay, it's not hard, but what it does is basically it can be good. So I'll be back in a minute. Just give me 5 minutes. Just get your thinking tank running, and I'll be back in 5 minutes, 2 minutes. Okay folks, I'm back. So you probably had some time to think about what we have done here, and now we have the state lookup table, and then we're gonna go to home tab, okay, and then close and load. So now we have state lookup. So you can see the city lookup, city connection, and then you have a state so state connection and the state lookup. Okay, so state ID is not been changed yet. The state lookup. Yeah, so we're gonna change that name to state lookup. God damn it. Okay, so we have a state lookup table and state connection table, city lookup table, city connection table. So what else we left with? We left with product category connection table. So we choose that again, go back to data and go to from table range, and my table has headers. Okay, so you got product category, click OK, bring it into Power Query. So once you bring it to the Power Query, the first thing we're going to do is basically we're going to change the name to product lookup. So this is going to be 3 or 4 product, right? Product lookup, because we're going to get rid of all the redundancy. So we call it product lookup, and then choose the whole table, and then right click, remove duplicates. It's going to be 3 or 4 product category, right? Okay, so there's 3 of them, and there's the one null values. Okay, so we don't need that, and we can keep that null value if you want to, but I don't think there is any need for it. So remove rows. You can remove that rows. One thing you need to remember, when it says null values, that doesn't necessarily mean it's empty. It does means that basically there is no record has been put into that particular row, and we don't need that in that particular case. So we're going to remove rows. So we're going to remove that rows, remove bottom rows. So that's been removed now. Okay, number of rows 1, click OK, and that row is null value is going to be gone. Okay, so you got furniture, office supplies, and categories. So that your product lookup table. Okay, and we change it to product lookup name. Okay, and then we go to home tab again, and then just press close and load. Now you have product lookup table in here, and product connection table, state lookup table, state connection, and then you also have city lookup and city connection. So now tell me which are the tables that you really need. So you need all this lookup table for your SQL. So you can actually start it. I'm not going to show that because of the time constraint. So what you do is city lookup table. Okay, so this is one unique table. Okay, this table you can actually transfer it, save it in your hard disk as a .csv format or .tsv. I would say .csv format, because what you're going to do when you start writing SQL code to actually create a table in SQL, an empty table in SQL, for example MySQL, then you can actually import this data set into your MySQL server. Okay, so how we do that is basically writing a bunch of SQL code to import the data as from CSV. But this lecture is not going to show that. This lecture is going to show all the golden rules that we're doing here. We're creating the table so that primary key foreign key relationship can be established. Okay, so you got city lookup, city connect, state lookup, state connect. Okay, and then all you need to save is basically state lookup, city lookup, and your product category lookup. Okay, so we have that product lookup. Okay, product lookup. Okay, that's fine. So now all these tables, we're going to do the fact table right here. Okay, so what we need to do in that fact table, because we don't want any redundancy, just tell me from basic intelligence what we do need. We need those city lookup, state lookup, product category lookup coming into this table as a number. Okay, so that number primary key, for example, Seattle is number 1. That number 1 matches with this table. Okay, so how are we going to do that? We just simply merge the table. This main table is going to be merged. Okay, and then we can remove all these columns, these 3 columns, but not now, because merging require this table to match with all those lookup table, right? Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go back to our data. Okay, and then we go back to our main Power Query screen. So we just fact table, click that fact table, double click the fact table, so we go to Power Query screen. So from here we're going to do the merging. Okay, so now in the margin, your fact table, city lookup, state lookup, product lookup is all look good. So we're going to do merge queries. Can you see merge queries right here? It's under file. Okay, so it's under file tab. Okay, so It's under home tab. If you want to class it transform, it's just under home tab. Okay, so in March queries, go March queries, click March queries. Okay, so you got a fact table right here. So you got your fact table. Okay, so what we need to do, we do the state, okay, right, before we do anything, close it, cancel it. I just want to tell you something, that nested things is important. So state first and then city. City belongs to the state. The state doesn't belong to city. So we're going to order it accordingly. So we're going to bring the state first here, okay, and then city. And then actually you can bring sales ID first. Okay, so we're gonna let's just do this right. Sales ID first, okay, and then you have sales. So these are your primary things, okay, and then you have your let's just do this now to get the order right, and then you have quantity. So sales quantity. So these are your main fact table. Do you understand? And the rest of the stuff is basically coming as a foreign key, and you'll see it in a minute. And then you have discount. After quantity, drop it here. So you got sales, this the quantity, discount, and they all have their unique transaction ID. And you can call it sales ID or transaction ID, right? And then the last one is profit. So that's the important one. And then we're gonna put it right here. Okay. So you got, this is your main fact table. So you know exactly what you're doing, right? So you got sales ID, sales quantity, discount, and the rest of the profit as well. Okay, so and rest of the stuffs are basically your data set that are associated, but not necessarily directly associated with that, what we call second normal form or first normal form. Okay, so state, city, product ID, they will come as a foreign key because they all have their own independent table that matched up with this table. So let's just do the merging now to match it up. So we're going to start with state first. Okay, so we go to March. So we go to home tab again. Okay, March queries. Click March queries right here, and then we're going to merge our state. This state, choose the state. Okay, and we're going to match that with the table. In here it will come up in here, and then you can see a state lookup table. Okay, and then we're gonna do the left outer join. That's fine. You can do what we call you can choose state ID or state. So in our case it's gonna be state because in here you have the state name right there. So choose state and it will match up just fine, and usually estimating matches. And 9,000, can you see there the section matches 9,994 rows. Why? Because in the first table we have the redundancy, but we have the unique table which we created based off the fact table, right? So what it does, Power Query is so powerful, Power Query is so powerful that it matches from the first table to the second table of the primary key foreign key relationship. Okay, and that's absolutely fine because with Washington is going to be redundant many times, and that's fine. It matches it, and that's what we need. Why we needed it? Because we want this state ID, which is basically primary key for this state lookup table, need to become into the fact table as a foreign key, so it matches. Do you understand? That is called develop relational, what we call relational database. Okay, that is what we. If you understand that much, then you are all good to go. You're done with it. You don't have to worry anything about SQL. It's like you learn everything's about SQL. That's the most key part, and people don't understand that. That's why this lecture is kind of intensive in that respect, but it is not really hard. It's kind of mundane or boring, but it's not hard. So click OK. And now the table, the state lookup table. So if you just click that little arrows in here, and then what we do need is the state ID. We don't need the state. Okay, so we just need the state ID, and click OK. And now you have the state ID right here. And now is the magic. You'll see one thing. So we're going to change the name, state lookup to state ID. You change the name. So this is your foreign key of this fact table, right? So this is the foreign key, but this is actually primary key for a state lookup table. So now if you just bring the state in here, one thing you'll notice very clearly is that if you look into the Washington is number 1. If you look into the state lookup table, Washington is number 1, right? Okay, so go back to fact table. So you see one thing is clear, that 1 is repeated many times, right? Okay, and that's absolutely fine because this is a foreign key. But you cannot have data quality repeating. That's what we call second normal form. Okay, so as long as you understand the first normal form and second normal form that I just explained, then you are all good to go. You don't have to learn about fifth normal form, fourth normal form, third normal form, etc., unless you become SQL developer. If you become a Java developer, that's all you need for SQL. So now we don't need a state table at all, and you can see that Washington has repeated several times and 1 is repeated several times, and we're happy with 1. Okay, Texas is number 2 and Texas has been repeated several times, and that's cool. You go back to state lookup table and you see 2 is Texas. Okay, so it matched up pretty perfectly fine, and this makes Power Query so easy to do this kind of stuff. So if you want to do it in SQL coding, it's easy as well, but you just have to learn how to do this in coding, and that takes a little time, and you don't need it as a Java developer. Okay, so now we're gonna choose the state and right click it and remove, basically remove column. So you just remove it, click remove, and the state is gone. So now we have a state ID. We're gonna do the same thing with city and product. Okay, so how are we gonna do that? Merge queries, click merge queries, and this time you're gonna choose city. So go and choose it, find city, here we go, city, choose city, and from the city lookup table choose city lookup and choose city, and they will match again 9,994 rows, nearly 10,000 rows. It's estimating matches based on data previews, and it matches. That check sign means everything's worked out good to go. Click OK. So now the city lookup is done, and then we're going to press that right there, and then all we need is city ID. We don't need city. Okay, and then click OK. And then just change that name to city ID. Press enter, and then bring the city ID next to the state ID. Okay, and then you can see the Seattle is number 1. If you go back to your city lookup, Seattle is number 1. If you look at the fact table, the number 1 has been repeated many times because Seattle has a lot of sale, right? Okay, you see number 1 quite a lot of time. And why? Because you can look in the city ID. Right, okay, so one thing that it has done is basically we don't need that column at all. Okay, so we're going to get rid of this column and just click remove it. Okay, so you got city ID now. Okay, so that's done. So you got city ID, you got your state ID, and then you got the furniture, in here, product category. Okay, so we're gonna do that. Is gonna be very simple. Okay, so we're gonna go to the merge queries again. I know it's a very long lectures, and it's kind of boring in that respect because you're just doing the same thing. So merge queries. Okay, so just choose the product category from here, and then go to the category lookup, product lookup, and just choose product category. So one thing we didn't do, I think, just cancel that. I think one of the things that we didn't do in product lookup, we didn't create it the index. You see, that was one of the issue. So we're gonna go to add column and then index column from 1. Now bring the index column right here, and we're gonna call it product category ID. Product category ID. Okay, so now this is done, and then you can go to fact table back in and do merge table. Go to your home tab, merge queries, and now choose product category, and then choose product lookup, and then choose product category, because we know we need this ID. Okay, 1 2 3, and it is matching, estimating matches based on data previews, and it will come out with 9,994 rows, right? So it matched up. Click OK. So your fact table now has foreign key, 3 foreign keys: city ID, state ID, and product category ID. Okay, so now from here, click that button, and all we need is product category ID. We don't need anything else. Okay, click OK. Now you can see that furniture is number one in our product lookup table. Okay, and that has been repeated. That number one has been repeated many times, right? Okay, so you have a product category. Well, you're going to change that product ID. There we go. Product ID, product category ID. So number one is furniture, number one there. Office supplies number two there, and there's quite a bit of changes of number two. Number is kind of random in that respect. So you got product lookup table 1, 2, 3, office supplies, technology, and the fact table has just done that just absolutely fine. So we don't need that product category because we don't need that string to be repeated all the time. So what we're going to do is we're gonna remove that. Remove that. Right, okay, so now all you have to do is your fact table is there. Okay, so you can save that fact table as a CSV file. Okay, you're gonna save that lookup table as a CSV file. Okay, and a state lookup table as a CSV file, and then product lookup table as a CSV file. So these are the 4 tables that you need to look at. Okay, so once you do that CSV file, and then you go to MySQL server and import those files by creating table, but make sure that you have the referential primary key and foreign key relationship when you create the table. But this lecture is not gonna go that directions because that's beyond the point of this lecture. But now this is done. So what we do need to do, we need to create a data model or entity relation model of one-to-many relationship, and then you will see what's going on. So from there, so what we do need to do, we need to get out from our Power Query window. So we go to home and close and load, and now you have these whole things in here. Okay, so you got fact table, you got city lookup, state lookup, product lookup table. Okay, so what we do need to do now is basically we're gonna go to Power Pivot. Okay, so once you go to Power Pivot, and then what we do need to do, no sorry, so we're staying data. Okay, so let's take a look. I've not done that for a while, so we can actually go to Power Pivot, I thought. Data. Right, okay, so I think we do need to go back to our Power Query window. Okay, so let's just go back to Power Query window. I don't see anything in here. No. Hang in there, dudes. We need to add this into our data model. Okay, and we can do that. I thought we go to Power Pivot. I don't know why these ones are not showing up. Like they all kind of there is something called add to data existing connections. Let's just refresh all first. Okay, I'm kind of a bit confused here because I need to bring that into the Yeah, I think one of the reason it is not working is because whatever we have done so far, we have not saved it. Okay, so we need to save this. Okay, so let's just save that. I think that's one of the reasons it's not doing that. So you see 50 states has 532 city, and your fact table has 994 rows. Okay, so save that file. No, it's got nothing to do with the saving. So where is the problem? This whole thing should be this. You see the add to data model, this is not chosen for whatever reasons. It has not been right. Okay, so let's just go back to Power Query. Okay, and then we have in here we have something called close and load. Very interesting. Very interesting. Right, okay, so I am not sure at this point. I'm really not sure at this point how to actually add this data into our data model. Okay, it's not allowing me to get into this data model thing. Okay, so we have an option in here, fact table. Choose the fact table, right click it, and this is load to. Click that load to button. Right, okay, so once you choose load to, it says add this to data model, and it is kind of not highlighted, and I'm really don't understand why. Okay, let's just from table range. Okay, so we can do this way. This is a different way of doing it. So we have that fact table 2 now. Okay, so you basically yeah, so what we have done here is we chose the table, and then we came here. Okay, fact table 2, and then now you can actually do close and load 2, but it is kind of fucked up because I thought that the original table could have been original, put it in there, but it's not letting us doing that, and I do not know why. So now we can do close and load 2. Okay, but let's just go. Let's just remove that table. Okay, delete that, and then go close and load. Okay, so you have this table in here. Okay, and I wanted to ask people that how I'm going to add that table into my Power Pivot, and it's not allowing me to do anything. This add data model is not highlighted, and I have no idea how I can do that. Okay, so if I choose from table range, it will load up. So I'm in the data it will load up, and then we can actually, it will create a fact table too, and then we can load it in the data model. Well, that is not an ideal way of doing it, but I am not sure why from here it's not been done, because I'm pretty sure I've done that in the past without any issue. The whole thing is not, the whole thing is not letting you do anything. So from here, if you go into that, and then if you do load to, it will not allow you, because this is not highlighted as at this data model. This should be added, so only create connection is still not letting you do what you wanted to do for whatever reasons. But what we can do is we can select the whole thing, and then try. Okay, so we selected all of it, and then right click it, and then send load to, but it's still at this data model, it's not allowing you to do that, and I have no idea why it's not allowing you to do that. Okay, I have no idea. So the other way of doing it, for the sake of this, because you're not Excel Power Query, you're not going to be data analytics, you don't have to master Power Query. So the way we're going to do it for now is basically we're going to go to data, and then so from table range, choose all that. Okay, click OK. My table has headers. Okay, click OK. Now it's gonna create a new fact table. Okay, it's the same thing, but it's gonna call it a different name. What the fuck happened there? It's getting all fucked up, really. Delete that. Delete fact table. Close and load. Yeah, I don't know what the hell is that. I don't know what the hell is that. Maybe the whole software has some kind of a glitch or something, because it's getting really weird now. Okay, it's getting really weird. I don't even know what the hell is that. So close the filter. Select a single cell in the range and try again. Yeah, so choose from table range. No, there's something wrong. Yeah, there's something wrong in here. I do not know what the fuck is going on here. Okay, so this one definitely I don't need this. I don't know what the fuck is going on here. Okay, so we can try deleting it. I don't see even an option of deleting it. I don't know what the hell is this. Okay, it's getting really fucked up. It's pissing me off actually. State connection, fact table, and these things, I do not know where the hell this one came from in data. let's close that. And it's not even showing up this thing that I need to see from here as well. Here, queries and connection. Okay, fine, fact table. And this thing, I have no idea what the hell is this. Delete. Yeah, delete this one as well. That's fine. Okay, I don't know what the hell happened here. So if I choose cell side, you just choose this bit and then from table range. Okay, right. Okay, so you have the fact table 2 now. Okay, so let's just do it from here. Okay, so we need to bring that table into our data model. Okay, so we go close and load 2, and we're going to close and load 2. Okay, and then you come up this screen. Existing, add this to data model, add this data to the data model. It's not allowing me. It's not allowing me, and I have no idea why not. No idea. So at this point, the only thing I can think of is basically to close the whole thing, save, and yeah, maybe that's why. You see, maybe that's why it need to be saved as XLSX workbook. Maybe that's why Excel workbook, and you need to be saved into. I don't know how people do data analytics. Such a bullshit thing to do my work, and we're gonna call it sales by states and cities. Okay, we're just gonna call it that. Okay, and save it. Okay, and now we go to my work, and then you have this bit. This is the one. Open that. I don't know how people work in data analytics. So fucked up. So from here, now you got the fact table right here. Enable content. That's fine. Okay, now I think you should be okay. So you go to Power Pivot. Now you can do add to data model. So because the problem was very simple. The problem was it wasn't saved as XLS format. So unless you saved your workbook as XLSX format, and it remain as a CSV, there is no way you can add it into the data model. Now we can add this to data model. Okay, so add that table to data model, add to data model, click that. Now it's gonna be easy. Yeah. So the fact table has been added. Okay, and now if it's been added, that's all cool. Save that. Okay, and then we're gonna do you can see the diagram view. If you go to diagram view, then you see all the columns in here. Okay, so sales ID, sales, quantity, discount, profit. Okay, so we're gonna drag it right here. Okay, so what's gonna happen, we're gonna create a data model in here. Okay, and that's all cool. So from here you can add more data. So what we're going to do is basically we're going to go into our state lookup table, and we're going to add that one as well. So we go to add data model, and that's been added as well. Okay, that's cool. And you can go to diagram view and see state lookup is there. So bring that right here. We're not going to connect at the moment. Okay, so this one has other stuff as well. So here we go. Okay, so you have to do what we do. I'll show you a little later. Let me just bring all this table right here, then you will understand what I'm doing here. Okay, so close that, and then we have our city. So let's just find the city. City lookup, bring that to data model, add to data model. So That's cool. Diagram view. So we are arranging the table accordingly. Okay, so now we got another one. Okay, and close the data model right here, and then we have the product category lookup, product lookup, or whatever. Yeah, that's the one. Add to data model. Now then, so we go to diagram view, right? Okay, so now this is gonna be basically your fact table is in this side. From there you're creating what we call one-to-many relationship. So a state can have millions of cells, but each cell represent with one cell's ID. Okay, so the fact table is on the right hand side, and the rest of them are in your lookup table is on the left hand side. Okay, so you understand now. If you want to connect these two tables, that is called relational database, okay, or data model in this data analytic perspective. So the state ID, just drag the state ID and then put it right here, and data model will create that. So what it is telling you, one to many, that star sign means many. Just understand what I'm talking here. Okay, so one to many, each state, okay, will have thousands of different cells. That's why it's many. But each cell represent one state. You cannot have one cell going to 100 different states. It's not possible. Okay, basic law of physics. But each state can have thousands of different cells. But each transaction is associated with one particular state, and that's why one-to-many relationship. And that is what we call Kimball's data dimension model, or you can call it entity relation model in SQL. Okay, and as soon as you created that, then you are home free. You've done in the SQL, done your SQL developer SQL 101 course is done. Okay, you don't need to go to university or anything like that, and it's not rocket science either. So city is the same thing. So go city ID. So we have city ID right here. So drag it to city ID right here, mash it there, and you data model Excel power pivot, it's called power pivot, will create that strong data model here. So one to many relationships. So each city can have thousands of different cells, but each cell is associated with one particular city. So you cannot have one transactions going into different cities, right? But one city can have thousands of different cells. Okay, so that's why one to many relationship. And product is the same thing. So you got product category ID and drag it to product category ID. Okay, so now we'll understand what's happened there. So each product category, let's say furniture, can be sold a million times. One transaction or one sale is associated with one particular furniture. This one, it is gone from the stock, is gone. So I hope this lecture is gone a little big, so my apology a little bit in that respect, because I struggle a little bit with Power Query because I don't particularly work in data science. But it is a 1 hour lecture. In university you get roughly around 1.5 hour to 3 hour lectures depending on the course module, but this is 1 hour lectures, and I hope you understand the lectures. And let me just quickly brief what we have done here. So we created that Power Query. So one basic take home message is, once you created this data model, then basically you know that you can look into the data model. That is what we call entity relation model, or relational database management system based model. You can call it Kimball data dimension model, or in data analytics and business intelligence, this is simply called as data model. What we created here is basically one-to-many relationship, and that came from 1970 when COD created relational database management system, or SQL. Okay, so this is not a rocket science or anything in any way. So what we have done here is basically in your particular case, in this particular table, what we're looking at fact table in here. So you go back to your data, and if you do queries and connections, and then it shows up, all that tables. And so all you need to do is basically bring this table now. So your Excel work is done. So you got fact table right here, and you got your city lookup table, state lookup table, product lookup table. And you don't need fact table 2 at all, so we can actually remove that, delete that table. We don't need fact table 2 at all. So that can so all you do is basically now you can save this file as a CSV format, fact table, okay, and then city lookup table, state lookup table, product lookup, and then you create a SQL database, a SQL table. Fact table, create fact tables with sales ID, sales, quantity, discount, and make sure that you give the right data type characters, okay. And then you go to your creating your city lookup table, state lookup table, product lookup table, and these tables you create, they will have all have a primary key. Your fact table will not just have a primary key, but also it will have a foreign key relationship that you will assign by writing a code in SQL that actually associated, for example, city ID. When you create state ID, that is a foreign key pointing towards state lookup table. Okay, so when you created that, and then you can export the data, import the data into SQL Server, and that will work just fine. So that is the best way to do it as a Java developer. So I hope this lecture has pointed out something, and I hope you learned something from it. And I'm not a professional tutor or anything like that. I just do as a Java developer what I have to do, and I hope you enjoyed that lecture. And I look forward to see you in my next lecture.